Good afternoon. The hour is 3:35. I would like to call to order the meeting of the Memphis City Council Budget Committee. Ms. Owens, would you conduct a roll call, please?
Councilman Warren.
Present.
Councilman Ford.
Present.
Councilman Carlisle.
Present.
Chair Jones.
Present. And by phone, we are joined by
Councilwoman Robinson.
Present.
Councilman Morgan.
Here.
Oh, that's all.
Okay, and then, colleagues, I was informed that Chiefs McGowan and Ford will be joining us virtually. Are they on the call yet? Okay, well, welcome you all. So, colleagues, you should have in front of you a presentation that it looks like Mr. Person, will you be presented it, or Mr. McGowan? Both names are listed here, but this is the fiscal 23 operating budget wrap-up scheduled for today.
I'll be presenting, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. Ms. McGowan, you're recognized.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for not being able to be there in person. Sign of the times today. We're presenting to you the operating budget wrap-up. Chief Ford is with me on the phone. She's just having difficulty speaking for a long period of time, but she can't answer questions. And Mr. Person is there, obviously, if you have other specific questions. But today, as you know, we went through the budget hearings for all the operating budgets as well as the capital budgets. All of those have been approved with very minor modifications. And so what we're presenting today is the information that was requested from you about where we stand after what we've done with the operating budget and information that you all have requested. So if you can move to slide 2. Slide 2, what we presented to you on the very top line were the revenues and expenditures that we presented to you in your very initial draft budget books.
Ms. McGowan, Ms. McGowan, excuse me.
Yes.
We're trying to get the presentation up on the screen, so can you just pause just for a moment until we get that up? I apologize.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you hearing me okay, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you just fine now.
Okay, great.
It's pretty bad echo.
Well, they had to turn it up a bit, but it's better than it was earlier
I will move closer to the microphone.
when he first started. Okay, we have it up, Mr. McGowan. And so you were on page 2?
On page 2, slide
Okay.
2, general fund approved as amended. This shows the budget as it has been approved through the course of the budget hearings. The top line is the general fund operating budget that we presented to you that showed revenues and expenditures. And as you know, that was about $4,000 off, but that's a rounding error in the budget. The next line is the proposed general fund that was approved. There's a slight change in revenues, and I'll talk about that down below, and a slight change in expenditures, and I'll also talk about that. The net change was $915,000 over budget. The two things that we discovered during the course of the budget hearings were that we underestimated the amount of airport reimbursement that was coming into the budget. And that was a net of about $136,000 that should have been added to our revenues. And then, as you know, as we were going through the budget with our legal division, we decided this year that legal would handle all of the expense recovery and all of the claims for legal. And that was about $1,047,000 in expense recovery. Now, legal was taking on all of the expenditures, but we had also credited legal with expense recovery from the divisions to the tune of about $1.023 million. As you know, when we went through the other divisions' budgets, there was no legal fees in there because we had decided to put it all into legal. So there was no funds to recover from the divisions. So that was about a change of about $1,047,000. Those together mean that the budget as it stood was $915,000 out of balance. During the council's hearings, there was several other changes. Grants and agencies, MRPP was allocated another $75,000. The city court clerk, their budget was reduced by $32,000. And then when the council approved the IBEW impasse, that was an impact of about $494,000 to the budget, meaning that as it stands today, the budget is about $1.4 million out of balance. That is a very small amount, and we think that that is obviously within the range that we can manage. One thing that you all are aware of, when we looked at the personnel line and we calculated the 2% raise, and I think Councilwoman Johnson called our attention to this, there was about $500,000 in the personnel line that we overestimated we would need. So we're under, if you take that into account, we're really under $1 million off of the budget, which is something that we can certainly manage too. Obviously, that's pending any other change the council would make. So today we're within $1 million of having a balanced budget. And as you know, you've heard me talk about in the past, if we're in that general range, we know that something will happen during the year and we're going to be able to manage to that amount of money. So let me move on to slide 3. That's where we stand today, is you have effectively no major changes to the budget, and we're very, very close to being balanced. So if you move to slide 3, these are the information requests that you had of us, and we'll talk about how we've allocated CIP money and other capital investments. We'll talk about traffic signalization and modernization. There was a correction to the general services budget that we discovered when Director Adams was giving his briefing. There was a question about public service corps, and then a question about how much we spend dedicating ourselves to litter, dumping, and trash collection. So I'll move on to slide 4. Councilman Jones, you asked this question. I call your attention to
is now joining.
I call your attention on slide 4 to the neighborhood asset spend by council super district. Councilman Jones, you asked when you looked at the FY23 proposed CIP, it appeared that there was more spending in Super District 9 than there was in Super District 8. And you are correct for fiscal year 23. But what this chart shows is since 2016, when this council was, when this mayor came in, and several of the council members that are on this current council came along, we added up all of the CIP projects that were in each super district. We also took the traffic signal modernization. We took all of the Accelerate Memphis projects, and we added them together to show the investments in Super District 8. And you can see that it is far weighted to Super District 8. Now, one thing I'd like to call attention to is that there were some relatively large projects in Super District 8 that were one of a kind. The Liberty Park, the large investment in the Pinch infrastructure because of St. Jude. Some capital expenditures on FedEx 4, 100 North Main, obviously investments in the riverfront and Mud Island, and investments into AutoZone Park as well. That brings that difference down. But you can see that Super District 8 has had, and this is something that we briefed back in, I want to say 2019 as well. And Councilman Jones will probably recall that, but there have been more investments in Super District 8 than Super District 9. Largely, that is because of the age of the infrastructure that we have in Super District 8 that has required some more investment. But that was the information you requested, and so we've presented it to you here today.
Yeah.
One note, doesn't include things like paving, sewer, storm waters, the convention center investment that we made, or police stations and fire stations. But if those were on there, the disparity would not be any different. Moving on to slide 5. This is a map that just shows traffic signal modernization. As you know, we'll be doing 28 of those this coming year. Engineering determined those signals that were the oldest and the most aged, and the ones that were in need of a modernization. About 4 of those are going to be funded through Accelerate Memphis, and about 24 are going to be funded through right-of-way funding that was allocated for street maintenance in our public safety referendum. Here's the correction to the general services budget. You all passed the general services budget, and it was a total budget of $25,529,676. As you called out during the
Mr. McGowan.
briefing there was an error.
Mr. McGowan, let us try to work out this audio. We're having some council members who are having a hard time hearing you based upon the system we have. It's better.
I'm sorry about that.
We can hear you, just hit an audio.
Okay.
This speaker is for your listening pleasure, but Cheyenne's is not working.
Okay, Ms. Johnson, this speaker right here is working. Let's try that one and see if you could hear.
I mean, if you sit outside, I'm telling you down there.
We are adjusting some seating, and hopefully that will solve our issue. Oh, that was, yeah, but you want to try that one? He's going to try this speaker, Ms. Johnson, because that one it was working okay over here in the scene. Ms. McGowan, can you say something just to test the speaker, please?
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Cheyenne, just come sit down. Come sit in this chair.
Yeah. One more time, please.
Sure. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1,
And he'll
2,
have that.
3, 4, 5.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think that.
Okay.
I'm happy.
That's this one here. Yes, ma'am. One more time, please.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Welcome to the fun side.
I think we have solved that issue for now, Mr. McGowan, so you can resume where you start, where you stopped off.
Reunited, and it feels so good.
He's in the audience. He's in the audience.
Okay, so we are on slide 6, the general services corrected. Again, as I was mentioning, you all approved his budget. The total was correct, $25,529,676. But when we presented the budget, there was error in the division between personnel services and materials and supplies. That has been corrected.
Is now exiting.
And that has now been corrected on this slide, and this is the actual correct presentation of division between personnel and materials and supplies. Moving on to slide 7. There was a request for information regarding the Public Service Corps. So this slide provides an overview to the Public Service Corps, who is eligible and the kinds of work that they do. It is meant to be an opportunity for persons to get meaningful work while they work on themselves as well. And obviously it targets opportunity youth and folks who have had a background that might preclude them from other kinds of employment. You'll see the eligibility there. We do review case by case any convictions within the last 7 years, but we do have employ people with backgrounds. It's about a 90-day participation, and folks are actively seeking some kind of certificate, diploma, or degree. We do have partners, and we offer training, CDL, defensive driving, and CPR certification are some of the trainings that we also offer people. Moving on to slide 8. There was a question about the head count. So far in FY22, we've had 67 persons work with the Memphis Public Service Corps. There are 31 staff members currently working. We've had 21 members of the Memphis Public Service Corps be placed into other jobs this year, 3 with external partners and 18 in the city of Memphis. We've had 10 people resign and 5 people separated. I'm happy to say that none of the separations or resignations were due to anybody having any law enforcement involvement. I think there was a question about recidivism. So we just have not had that issue here. And you can see the headcount detail, the applicants, the number hired, pending backgrounds, and then the MHU files is the Manhood University and referrals that we are getting from that program. Go to the next slide. Their question was outcomes. This is the work that they have done in FY22. 52,000 bags of trash have been collected by the Memphis Public Service Corps members and 17,820 tires. Sorry about that. My dog doesn't like that. Hey. 17,822 tires have been collected. Moving on to slide 10. The question was asked about how much we spend on trash, litter, and illegal dumping. Clearly, the entire solid waste division works a lot on illegal dumping this year and trash collection. So that's about a $75 million budget, and you can see all of the detail we have there. Then the Department of Public Works, we have about $13.8 million that we spend on environmental enforcement, ground services, which cleans up about 9,500 lots, Memphis City Beautiful, who does education and community cleanups. Our stormwater department also spends money cleaning trash out of the waterways. Drain maintenance keeps our storm drains clear and keeps trash from going into the waterways. Right-of-way maintenance, which is a part of our streets department, spends about almost $4 million just picking up litter from the right-of-ways. And our street sweepers obviously sweep every street at least twice a year. And then you can see the amount we also spend on Memphis Public Service Corps picking up garbage, litter, and tires, trash, citywide. So all in about $89 million that we spend just on picking up the trash, litter, and debris that is. And we propose this year to add some additional funds there for a dedicated illegal dumping crew. Moving on to slide 11. So, Chairman Jones, you asked us to describe for you what the value of a penny is based on our tax rate this year. The answer is, in practice, it's $1.47 million. That is because we don't typically collect 100% of what taxes are owed. As you know, there are some that are just bad debt that gets written off, and we try to collect. If it was 100% collected, it would be $1.53 million. But in practice, it's about 1.47. And as you'll recall, about 4 years ago, it was about $1.2 million was the value of a penny. So slightly up because obviously our tax rate is slightly down. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that is the information that we had notes on that we were requested to provide information back to you. I'll stop and take any questions that you have at this point. And I know we have some staff members in the room, as well on the phone with me, should we need to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gowan. We have, I'll first recognize council members who are online to see if they have any questions. And I hope that have they received copies of this presentation? Do you know if it's been emailed? Okay. So Councilman Morgan, did you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Is Chief Smith, is she on the line or available?
Chief Smith? No. Okay. Currently, no.
Okay. If not, Chief Ford or McGowan might be able to answer this question. Again, this goes to the overall budget, and that my vote is still I'm on the edge of whether or not I'm going yes or no on this. And a lot of it goes back to the sales tax referendum. And so the question I had was a technical question about HR as I'm investigating and exploring, possible amendments that wouldn't be ready for today, but maybe in the next week or so. Are we allowed legally to provide a subsidy or an additional discount on employee premiums, healthcare premiums for some employees but not for others. Specifically, I'm thinking about providing an additional benefit to public safety employees on their healthcare premium paid for by that sales tax referendum. Is that something that we are even allowed to do, or do we have to design and create plans that each employee equally has a choice to participate in, and not have it be exclusive to one division or another?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, Councilman, and say that we have done that specifically with the public safety referendum money provided. There was, as some of the spouses came back in, we had covered the cost of that. There was basically just a stipend program that covered the cost of the premium for the returning spouses. And so I believe that I can ask legal, but we have done that in practice.
That's correct. I forgot about the spousal carve out. So that would constitute kind of a different subsidy or benefit for one division versus another of city government. Okay. All right, that's something I'm looking at. Again, this is something we discussed for years, Gowan and Chief Ford, about how that tax referendum money was spent, what its intended purpose was, and the people voted to put that tax on themselves. And two of my favorite things in the world are included in that language, which is public safety and street maintenance, which is also, I would consider litter and potholes in terms of the cleanup. So I'm looking at maybe making some amendments, and I'll work with you all over the next week or have some more discussions about that shift. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Morgan. Councilwoman Robinson.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Is Councilman Logan on the call? Councilman Logan, do you have any questions?
I don't at this time. Thank you, sir. I was just reviewing the summary. That's the information that I requested, and just kind of looking at that. I may have some later. Okay.
Councilwoman, I'm sorry, Councilman Carlisle. I think he was in the queue. Then you, Councilwoman Jones. I'm sorry.
Thanks. Information. I looked down at Martavius and laughed. I was like, now I just have more questions. I saw Chief Ryan out there. You don't have to, you're not going to have this on the fly, but I would be very curious if you and Philip could break down on bulk pickup the percentage of what we would just call like seasonal leaf and storm debris versus home goods. We had a neighborhood meeting in Berkeley, Avon, and the Heights, and there was a lot of discussion. And I know and I'll just say this generally, I know it's a really touchy subject when we start talking about fees in and around the city of Memphis, but one of the common themes from that neighborhood association was bulk trash on the street curb. Like, it's an amazing amenity in the city of Memphis to basically be able to toss anything out there on the sidewalk and it gets picked up in your flat rate. But it also is kind of a double-edged sword, and I know we've had that conversation even before I was on the council, but I'd like to revisit looking at some metric about non-storm debris, seasonal leaf, bulk pickup fee, or schedule service, only to act mainly as a deterrent rather than a revenue production. Because a lot of the feedback we're getting, and we had this when I think JB brought his set out ordinance, which is people, including commercial landlords that are subject to commercial pickup, just dumping people's crap on the side of the road. And so on their behalf, I'd like to explore that, and the bulk number made me think of that. Councilman Morgan brought up a really interesting point. Chief McGowan responded as a stipend. I would think, assuming that the budget could withstand it, Chief, that doing, and this is just an arbitrary number, but paying 100% of employee premiums for first responders or reimbursing them. Oh, hey, friend. Chief Smith's here. Chief McGowan. I know you guys can't see her. But as some sort of, we're talking about anything and everything that we can do to be more competitive, but looking at something out of the sales tax that would be a reimbursement and maybe it tiers down over a period of years is an interesting idea. Maybe you guys have had that dialogue, but I'd be curious to hear more about it. But those were my two big things that I picked up on while we're talking. Oh, public service corps. Sorry, that was the last thing. So for me, and I know for Councilman Canale, and I'm sure for others, but he's been a very big vocal proponent of the work, which I am too. I think the public service corps has become this very nimble organization that has the ability to go out and be very quick and responsive on non-private property. And to that end, I am very, very pro public service corps. On whether or not it's working as it was originally intended, I'm not sure that I'm convinced that it is. It doesn't mean that you fold up shop, but maybe we start looking at expanding the public service corps to do what we want it to do, which is to it's twofold, but I'm going to say more on the street level, which is be a very quick, nimble, responsive unit for trash pickup and tires and things like that. We may have to revisit the job training piece and job placement piece. I'm not sure that that's hitting the way we want it to, but it doesn't mean that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater, for lack of a better phrase. So I appreciate the information. There's a lot to digest here. And like others, I'm sure I'll have some follow-ups, but just wanted to say thank you. This is very helpful. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Carlisle. Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity. Councilman Carlisle, I agree with you. I mean, I'm driving through the neighborhood and the trash is just building up. It's not being removed quickly enough. And it's different type of trash. You know, some of it's situations where builders are renovating, but some of it's still old debris from the storm that we have, and people are finally getting the debris moved to the street. So let's do whatever we can possibly do to correct that issue. But at the same time, after reviewing all the grant recipients for our community grants, I'm here like to propose that we add an additional $50,000 to every city council person grant funds received this year. Yes, 50,000. I mean, we had a request for $5 million. It's a lot of work to get done in this community, and believe it or not, it's a lot of the small nonprofit groups that help us with this information and helping getting this work done. So I'm asking for support of my colleagues for an additional $50,000 so we can assist the nonprofits that did make application to us, and it's obviously we're not going to be able to do it with the funds that we currently have of $200,000 apiece. So do I need to make that as a motion now?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to move that we increase the City Council Community Grant Program from $200,000 per City Council person to $250,000.
Chair, I'll second that for the purposes of discussion.
Okay. Okay, motion has been made and seconded that we increase the amount of the council grants from $200,000 per council member to $250,000, which would raise that amount from $2,600,000 to $3,250,000. Councilman Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair. Councilwoman Johnson, you know I got deep love for you. I understand your point of view, and I can respect that opinion. For me, this also harkens back to the council's action on Tuesday to spend $1 million on a city holiday versus what it could do for extending hours in community centers or splash pads for parks. And so while I recognize that some of the groups that are in the council grant program are doing the work, I'm not sure that every group that gets money is a solid steward. And I can't be for certain because we never really do get any sort of formal KPI. I know they come back and do some presentations to the body, but in my opinion, the best way to serve the citizens of Memphis, if we're going to find $1 million here or there, are supporting the services that we already have, like libraries, community centers, solid waste pickup, or even directly to some of the partners we have, like Boys and Girls Club, that are doing the work that we're supposed to be doing. You think about employee. If we had an additional $1 million, even, and I can't remember the cost per employee, but I think it's somewhere, call it $1,500 a student or an employee. I mean, that's 650 kids right there that we could employ through the summer. So I appreciate this. I'll go with the will of the body, but it's hard for me to support this when we've got other programs that could benefit more. That I yield the floor.
Councilwoman Johnson?
Yes, I appreciate those comments, and I realize there's always a different way of looking at a situation. We always have to think about those who are trying to make a difference, and these nonprofit groups are trying to make a difference. In reference to what they're actually doing, I strongly recommend anyone that you give funds to, you need to visit those organizations and make certain they're doing what they're supposed to do. I do it. I make certain that individuals I'm sending funds to actually are doing the work in the community that I'm expecting it to take place. So I'm still requesting support from my colleagues for the additional $50,000 to help the nonprofit organizations that made application. Times have gotten tough. We realized what you could buy last year for the same amount of money is not the same this year. So I'm asking for support from the colleagues to go forward with this additional $50,000 per individual so they can help their particular district and their constituents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other colleagues want to speak? Councilman Canale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, you heard me talk about last week, and I know that you were already aware, our retirees have not had a raise in 11 years. The mayor's budget for 23 has proposed 1% raise, but with inflation at a 40-year high, I don't think 1% goes far enough. So I'm going to make a motion that we bump that to 2%. Each 1% raise is about $1.5 million. And I'm happy to work with Chief Ford between now and Tuesday if we need to bring this back up in executive session, Chairman, before we send it to the full body. I'll take your advisement on that. Because I know that we have to achieve a balanced budget. I think there's multiple areas where this money can come from, and I'm happy to work with Chief Ford in the meantime.
Thank you, Mr. Canale. How I envision, and it's the will of the body, how I envision the wrap-up to take place is that there are things that we want to include in there. We put them on the table. This is just the committee. We don't have our full complement here. And so I would, thank you, I would like for us to afford the entire council the opportunity to discuss anything that comes before this body. So,
Okay.
I guess what I didn't do a second ago, I didn't ask for a vote on Mrs. Johnson's motion, which was made and seconded, but I would hope and exercise the chairman's discretion to essentially say, even if something fails in committee, we bring it back before the entire council because we don't have the entire complement here to address those issues.
Chair.
Okay.
Would
Yes,
it be
ma'am.
advisable just to take all the votes once the full committee here?
Remember, it just goes without a negative or positive.
Okay. Thank you for that, yeah. So I'll come back to you, but let's just dispose of the previous motion that was made.
Okay.
And, but we at least have it on there, and then we can come to yours, because in order to recognize yours, we'd have to have a motion to have that to go before the full council as well.
Let's deal with one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, so we had a motion that was made by Councilwoman Johnson, seconded by Councilman Carlisle. And so I think that Councilman Morgan wanted to speak on the did you want to speak on the previous item or the item that Mr. Canale brought up, Mr. Morgan?
I was going to speak on Councilman Johnson's motion, but
Okay.
I withdraw, to be honest. My sentiments were similar to Councilman Carlisle's and don't need to necessarily be repeated.
Okay. So at this point, what I'd like to do, I'd just like to have a roll call vote for the motion that was made by Councilwoman Johnson to increase the council grant to $3,250,000, which is $250,000 per council member.
You have to do a roll call, I think.
Yes, that's what we're going to do.
Councilman Carlisle.
Abstain.
Councilman Ford. Councilman Canale.
Abstain.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Yes.
Dr. Warren.
Aye.
Chair Jones.
Aye.
Oh, sorry.
And then,
Councilwoman Logan.
Aye.
Councilwoman Easter Thomas,
Aye.
Councilwoman Robinson,
Abstain.
Councilman Morgan,
Abstain.
There is two.
Okay, with that, the ayes have it on that one, and we can discuss that as well.
I got an issue.
Did you call on Mr. Ford for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody can't vote. I wouldn't be here today. I'm kind of sick. You know, COVID is out there. Half these people do not have on masks on. I got an issue with that. And every time I was there, I could not vote. People cannot vote that's not here, okay, today. That's the only reason why I'm here today. Now,
Mr. Ford, in committee we can, but during regular council meetings, we cannot.
You know, I'd like on this a friendly amendment on Ms. Johnson. $250 for this coming year only. Then, hey, we can see it next year because of COVID. Then I don't think I would have a problem with it, but I'm gonna have a problem if y'all were talking about passing something. Hey, I don't care about committee, nothing else. Y'all did not let me vote, so hell, I didn't let nobody else vote today. I could stayed at home, I wanted to. Stayed in my business, and I could have been online too. I ain't got no problem with that. But friendly amendment on that for this just 1 year, then we'll see it again. Okay, COVID has been bad. Things have been hard. 1 year extension on that, and I don't think nobody will have a problem with that. Then we can kind of help some of these people that we have in our districts and everything else. You know, and reason why the young man that came that we went out Saturday to see, you know, that's gonna be a very nice thing that they're having. You know, I just hate they didn't bring it to me in the beginning. They wouldn't have had to go through all this, but it's something worthwhile that they're doing, and got a chance to meet some of the young men that they're helping. And they were some nice young men. Okay. So, you know, that's a friendly amendment. If we can do that, and I don't care who vote for it then.
I would note, in reading the resolution that was prepared by Councilwoman Johnson, it does specify that this is for the Council Community Grant Program for fiscal year 23.
Okay.
It's already.
As long as it's for that, and then we'll revisit it, but
Right,
please, we revisit it afterwards.
24 is not even contemplated.
Okay.
In this.
As long as it's that, okay.
Thank you, Councilman Ford.
Okay. Okay, so with that, thank you, Councilman Ford. That item passes. Councilman Canale.
Thank you, Chairman. I move that we increase the raise for retirees from 1% to 2%.
I'll second that for the purposes
Okay.
of discussion, Chair. I have a question.
Okay, we recognize Councilman Carlisle and Councilwoman Johnson.
What is the hard dollar amount that would move it?
1.5.
And is this intent, I mean, this is an ongoing reoccurring expense. Do you have a line item?
Well, I said earlier when you stepped out, yes, I think there's a couple different sources.
All right, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Johnson.
Chair, I need to ask a question for clarification. Councilman Canale, did you say from 1% to 2%?
Correct.
I think they're receiving 2%, if I'm not correct.
Retirees are only getting 1. Yeah.
Oh, this is for,
This is just for the retirees.
oh, retirees. Okay, cool. Okay, I'm with that. This is totally different. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Council Chief Ford.
Good afternoon, council members. This is Shirley Ford, Chief Financial Officer. Just for clarity, wanted to make sure you understood that the 1% COLA is a cost of $1.5 million for the next 30 years. So that increases the ADC by $1.5 million for the next 30 years. Obviously, a 2% COLA is approximate, going to double that. So that would be $3 million annually to the ADC for the next 30 years, assuming no other market conditions change. Just wanted to make sure you had that information.
Okay, well, I have a question for the maker of the motion because this specifies a 2% increase in retiree pay in the city of Memphis budget. To me, that contemplates the general fund, but it seems like that the response that Chief Ford provided, that is an obligation of the pension fund. So a question that I would have, and this may be to you, Chief Ford, is it permissible, and perhaps Mr. Canale, is it your intent to make this a one-time increase of 1% coming from the general fund versus coming from making this an obligation of the pension fund?
Chief Smith's been working on an alternate plan that mimics a couple of different other. So I would be open to whatever the body wants to do, but will you expound upon what from the Louisiana to the?
Well, before you do, Chief Smith, let me hear from Chief Ford. I think she wanted to respond to that. Chief Ford.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Jones. The impact that I'm talking about to the ADC is it will start next year. That is across all funds to everyone who participates in the pension fund. So all things being equal, if nothing else changed year over year, our ADC for next year would go up $1.5 million. That amount is charged against the current employee's pension for their pension expense and then to the ADC expense line. So it is across all funds and it impacts all funds in future ADCs. The ADC requirement for
Okay, and so, Mr. Canale, my question for you is this, but this would be for this current fiscal year, to go from 1 to 2?
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Owen, was there anybody else online that had a question about anything on this item? Okay. If there are no other questions or anybody want to speak on this item, I would ask for a roll call vote on this item, please, Ms. Owens.
Councilman
Wait,
Carlisle?
before you do, I'm sorry. Councilwoman Johnson.
Yes, for clarity, are we voting to increase it from 1% to 2%? Or look like I heard she wanted time or come back with a plan? I mean, what are we voting on?
So what we'd be voting on would be this resolution here. She still would be, at some point after July 1st, come to us with a permanent, because this, as the way that I read this does not institute a permanent COLA. It doesn't say this is a COLA. Right. So this is not a COLA, an ongoing increase that we're approving here. This is a one-time bonus. Correct.
Well, I have a slightly different interpretation. I actually believe it's supposed to be a COLA, so it will be baked into the future.
I think the issue we're having is mechanics, and we're all saying the same thing. I think what I heard Chief Ford say is the ADC set. And so what I think Canale's trying to get at is, all right, let's just get at the root, what we're trying to deliver here. He wants more money by a point for retirees. The question is what is the most cost-effective strategy for the city? I am not a actuarial for a major accounting firm, so I don't know if it is an ADC calc issue that would be more financially efficient, or if it is a straight cash bonus, which is basically what this is saying. And the question is do we just cash bonus for FY23 and the intent of the body is to have that then roll into the ADC? Or you could just come back every year and say, whatever the ADC is or whatever that accrual is going to be, we're just going to every year earmark whatever a point on top of that is. I mean, that's the idea here, right? So
Can you mute them, please?
So I guess that was really the question for you and Chief Ford, which is the intent's to increase at a point for FY23 and every year going forward. The question is, what's the mechanism of doing that? And what's more cost efficient? I don't know that because, again, I don't understand our ADC and that calculation as much as I would like to because I don't deal in defined benefit programs. So I think that's to the maker of the motion in the chair, I think that's where we're at, right?
I'm seeing that, and I'm a bit confused by it too, because the way I read this is that we want a one-time percent bonus, or 1% bonus, $1.5 million. We're not necessarily contemplating what's going to be the ADC of this ongoing. Right. So I think that the way, I guess, I probably need some direction from the administration or some clarity from the administration, because it seemed like Ms. Ford responded one way, talking about we have this obligation going forward. But the way that I read this resolution, it is not your intent right now for us to have this as an obligation going forward, and which I don't think would be the point if we made a one-time cash bonus that totals $1.5 million from the general fund.
I think what we can do is a one-time bonus, wait to hear Chief Smith's plan, and then we can decide what we're going to do going forward after that.
Yeah.
I think that's where we were, but I don't think I got that from Chief Ford's response.
Okay.
But what we would be voting on would be a one-time, and so still my question remains, can we do that from the general fund? Does that have to come from the pension fund?
Even the pension fund comes out of the general fund. When we make our ADC,
no, the contribution does, but what I'm saying is that we don't necessarily have to take from a distribution from the pension fund right now to pay 1.5.
Right, that's what you're saying. So
we could do that as a one-time from the general fund itself.
I have a suggestion to get us moving.
Yeah.
Let's move this to be on Tuesday's agenda from this committee without a recommendation. That gives a few business days to do some quick homework, and then we can revisit this, if it's okay with the chairman, on Tuesday morning in his committee, and then we're set to vote on it that Tuesday, if that works for everybody.
Okay, that does. Chief Ford is in the queue to be recognized. Chief Ford.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. Just to be clear, a COLA, or a cost of living increase, is a permanent move. That means that you give an increase of what the retirees are receiving. So in this instance, a 1% increase that goes on forever, right? It doesn't stop. And that's the $1.5 million impact to the ADC for the next 30 years. A bonus, as we have done, I think we did one like 2 years ago, is a one-time, they get either how you calculate it, a percentage or a flat fee, which is, I think, what we did the last time, and that comes out of the pension fund cash. Now, just remember, even though it comes out of the pension fund cash, next year, when we get our ADC, we have to make up the deficit of the money that comes out of that fund. So you have your COLA is ongoing. It goes on forever or for 30 years. A bonus is a one-time, but it does have an impact in the next year on your operations from the general fund and the pension fund.
Councilman Warren.
I have a question for Chief Ford. Over the last 5 years, what have the retirees received as far as COLAs are concerned annually, each year?
Zero.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. They have not received a COLA increase. They did receive a one-time bonus, and I think Chief Smith can check me on that, but I think it was 2 years ago.
And that one-time bonus was what percentage of their annual pay?
I would have to look back. I can't remember if it was a percentage or if it was a flat fee or a flat dollar amount for each participant, but we can look back on the records and check that for you.
So as you're planning future budgets and you're looking at our retirees out there living on fixed incomes, what are your thoughts about how we should proceed to make sure that they're not living on less and less actual money?
Thank you, Councilman Warren. I think that is a very fair and good question. As we have moved through several budget years, you can tell that some of those have been very constrained, very tight. As we moved into this year to take advantage of our financial situation, we have proposed increases to the employees and a cost of living increase, a permanent increase to our retirees, and not just the 1% increase to the retirees, but a plan that we would put in front of this council that would have certain goals, and it would have certain
Jamie, tough flare engine.
That would have thresholds.
Is now joining.
It would have thresholds that if we met certain thresholds, it would guarantee the retirees additional evaluation to look at COLAs so that we don't end up in the situation where it's been a great number of years since the retirees have received a COLA. I think it's something that we all believe is a best step forward, but we do need to put a plan in action that would make us meet certain thresholds in order to do that, in order to protect the integrity of the fund. And I think Chief Smith has some additional information in that regard.
So Councilman Warren, just to answer that question, so what we've been looking at is other, if you will, COLA strategies that other pension programs have. And what we have found is that they typically have some clear thresholds where if, for example, the pension fund hits a certain actuarial rate of return, or if it meets its ADC obligation, therefore with a legislative body approval, a COLA will be given with respect to the consumer price index up to a certain maximum. And so we've been evaluating different options to develop a plan for the city of Memphis that we want to bring forward to the council for discussion and approval.
When do we see that plan?
Very, very quickly. We are in works of now, so I would expect that by next month we would have something for you.
And I guess my other question is, because I don't understand these, so is the reason that we haven't seen this before is that we haven't put enough money into the pension fund for it to grow in a way that would develop a natural cost of living increase? Is that the issue? We don't have enough in the fund?
And Chief Ford definitely can give even more detail, but yes, the financial challenges that have faced the pension fund since 2014 have been one of the primary discussion points in terms of why we have not developed a COLA strategy. And Chief Ford, you may want to expound.
So I guess before she talks, I'm just wondering, we've had like this really good stock market up until, just the last month or so. And was this invested in stocks or was it in bonds? How does that work for us to know?
Both. It's a diversified portfolio.
Okay. All right. All right. Yeah, thank you very much. So the answer to my question is by next month, we're going to see a plan to where we're going to have cost of living going toward our retirees.
Correct. And the thresholds related to that.
How does that get into this budget?
Well, the intention would be for FY24 and beyond, so it wouldn't be related to this budget, but would be related to future budgets as a funding strategy.
So if we as a council wanted to make sure that we gave our retirees something this year, it would be better to have it as a bonus as opposed to a cost of living. Is that correct?
I'm going to defer to Chief Ford on that question.
Chief?
Thank you, Councilman Warren. And again, the cost of living increase is permanent, right? It doesn't have any impact on the FY23 ADC, but it does have an impact on the ADC for the next 30 years. The one-time bonus, we could pay immediately. It comes out of the pension fund. But again, that's just pulling money out of the pension fund that next year, all things being equal, we would have to replace. And to your point exactly, when the market is up and we have good returns, that really helps our fund balance. And it helps us attain our contributions. And as this council knows, we absolutely must hit our contribution, our ADC, every year. We are required by law to do that. So if we're looking at a $52 million ADC for FY23, all things being equal, if the market stayed exactly the same, the investments returned exactly the same, what they did for the prior year, our ADC would go up $1.5 million. The other thing that has to be considered is what happens to the market conditions during the next year. And so that's part of the formula of the ADC, and the contributions from the employees make up a small percentage of the annual requirements. The majority of that annual requirement is earned by the investments in the pension fund, and it is a mixed. We have an investment policy that spreads our risk across bonds, stocks, and other markets, real estate and other markets. So we try to make sure we have a good mix, so when one market goes down, hopefully the other market goes up.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. I guess the question that I still don't know is what you're saying is we cannot take general fund money and give an extra 1% bonus or whatever to our retirees. You're saying it has to come out of the pension fund, or do we have the option to come out of the general fund?
You can pull the cash from anywhere you want to. If you want to take $4 million, whatever, however much it is, from the general fund and contribute it to the pension fund to get paid out through the pension fund to the retirees, we absolutely can do that.
Okay, Ms. Ford, a clarifying question. Does it have to go to the pension fund first? Can it go from the general fund directly to the retirees?
It must go through the pension fund first. That's how the contributions to retirees are made, through the pension fund.
Gotcha.
And
okay.
Is that what the problem is, and how it changes future donations if we do it a one-time bonus, or can it not change future donations until you have your plan up?
So the plan is reviewed annually, and we usually get our ADC in October for the following year. So, for instance, that's our first piece of our budgeting plan when we start budgeting, is what is the ADC for the next year. And it is not just market conditions. There are, as Councilman Carlisle said, there is an entire formula related to how the ADC is calculated. But for years, we did not meet our ADC, and the state stepped in and made it a law and required us to do that. And we had 5 years to do what they called progressive funding until we caught up. But when we caught up in 2020, from that point forward, we can never not fund our ADC. No matter what happens to it, we have to fund our ADC. So if the market crashes this year and the value of our investments go down, our ADC requirement will go up next year. If the market rises, our investments do well. Typically, all things being equal, our ADC would go down.
Councilman Warren?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I understand it better, but I'll need more explanation. I'm a little dense. Thank you.
Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I have another question, just for clarity, and I think this needs to go to Chief Ford. when the sales tax referendum was passed, were the retirees, the firemen and the policemen retirees affected in any way?
So yes, ma'am. There is yes and no. The provision was the restoration of benefits for a class of people that was within police and fire. That restoration of benefits included allowing the choice of those particular police and fire employees to return to the legacy pension plan or to stay in the hybrid plan. It also enabled them to get restored to the health care benefits that they had prior to the OPEB, prior to the changes that we made in OPEB. So the referendum money, I think, as we've said several times, there are pieces of that goes toward the ADC every year for those particular employees. And there are pieces that go into the health care for those employees and pieces that go into OPEB for those employees. And then there are pieces of that upon the recommendation of the state comptroller's office that go into reserves for each one of those categories. So the short answer is yes, it ultimately comes to that, but the immediate reaction to that is not specifically toward retirees.
Okay. So I do want to clarify that a little bit. So for retirees, the one thing that it definitely, the sales tax referendum definitely did change was the access to our group health care plan, particularly for the pre-65 retirees. And the first year we had 464 new dependents and retirees that joined our plan, and then last year we had 257. So we did see an uptake on our retiree group health plan as a result of that.
Okay, my question still remains, and I'm not clear on it. In your process of negotiating with the fire department and the police department, did the retirees, firemen and police, receive any additional funds?
No.
So they're treated like any other retiree, so they didn't get help in any way in regards to their pension. Okay. Okay, I just wanted that for clarity. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. All minds, hearts clear on this item? For the record, please note that Councilman Smiley has joined. So, Ms. Owens, would you conduct a roll call on this item of approving a 2% pay increase for City of Memphis retirees?
Councilman Carlisle? Councilwoman Johnson?
Yes.
Councilman Ford?
Yes.
Councilman Canali?
Yes.
Councilman Warren?
Yes.
Councilman Smiley? Councilwoman Logan?
Aye.
Councilman Morgan?
Abstain.
Councilwoman Easter Thomas?
Aye.
Councilwoman Robinson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Swearingen?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye. That item passes.
If something changes by Tuesday, we may have to do it.
Indeed, yes. So it will go before the full committee with a positive recommendation by the council. Okay, so Chief Ford and Chief McGowan, I had a couple of questions on the before I recognize. Did anybody on the line want to be recognized or have any questions? Okay. I wanted to go back to the presentation, Mr. McGowan, and talking about the Public Service Corps, 7 and 8, well, particularly 8. My question is, do we have similar data for the previous years? I know that things were muted a bit because of COVID, but I'm just curious to see if we have the numbers for the previous years.
I will ask the question, Chairman. We did not prepare it for the previous years, but I'm sure that we can probably collect that data. It might take a minute to get it, but we can try to put it together for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councilwoman Johnson.
67 applicants, and you only hired 48. What was the reason that other applicants did not qualify?
Okay, I'm going to ask, I think we have some representatives who might be able to help out, because I don't have the exact reasons with me, so I don't know if Deputy Chief Ryan's there or Mr. Moody, who might be able to help shed light on that.
Did you see that?
Yeah. We have Mr. Moody to speak on this item. Mr. Moody, can you just identify yourself for the record, please?
Yes, sir. Ken Moody, Special Assistant to the Mayor. And Councilman, could you repeat your question so I can make sure I know exactly?
On the document that was provided, it said that they had 267 applicants that applied, but only 48 was hired, and you got 15 pending background checks. So I'm guessing what happened to the other 220?
Yeah, it could be various reasons. Sometimes the applicants don't follow back up with us. We'll reach out to them, they don't follow back up. Some of them may have some more severe background issues that we cannot hire them for, so those reasons just vary.
Okay. That's my question. We're trying to push this program, and we probably need to know in the future why these individuals were not qualified, because we don't want to send people if we know for some reason you will disqualify them, but that seems like a large number. You beating the police department.
Yeah, we've encouraged them to apply, and even if they don't qualify for our public service corps, we've got our reentry program, our manhood and wild programs, and other opportunities for them.
So
specific to this program.
So do you know if any of these were transferred to any of those other programs?
We refer them. If they come to our program and they don't qualify, we do refer them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Chief McGowan, I have another question since I have the mic. On page 2, I thought the IBEW amount of $494 was for 2 years. I don't have my paperwork in front of me. I'm talking to Chief McGowan.
Yes, okay, I believe that is the 1 year total increase, but I'll just have Chief Smith or Chief Ford verify that for me, because that's what we calculated as a 1 year increase. Can somebody verify that for me?
The 494 is an annual amount.
That's correct?
Annual.
Okay, thank you.
Colleagues, I have distributed to you a couple of resolutions that I would like to present for consideration. The first is going to be a resolution to amend the fiscal year 23 budget to increase pay for general employees and the fire division. I'll read it. This is a short resolution, so I'll read it into the record. Whereas the mayor submitted to the council of the city of Memphis on April 19th, 2022, a recommended operating budget and capital improvement program budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023, that proposed a pay increase for firefighters in the amount of 3% and for general employees in the amount of 2%. And whereas the council recognizes the steady rise of the cost of living in the city of Memphis and sees the need for pay increase in order to accommodate the cost, the mayor's proposed budget indicated that pay increases were made possible by the increase in local and state sales tax activity. Whereas the council seeks to further increase the pay for firefighters by 0.5% and general employees by 1.5%, that would amount to a total pay increase of 3.5 for each division. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Memphis City Council hereby amends the fiscal 23 operating budget to include a pay raise in the amount of 3.5 for general employees and 3.5 for firefighters for the city of Memphis. And so, colleagues, I present this because I just have, just a philosophical issue on providing disparate pay and treatment for disparate class of employees. I understand the duty of firefighters and police are a bit more hazardous than some of the other ones. And if you notice that there is, for this budget in next year, there's a proposed 5% increase for fire. But, I'm sorry, for police. This contemplates, instead of a 3% for fire, a 3.5%, but also providing that 3.5% for all city employees, in addition to, for all general employees in addition to fire, and then this would leave in place the 5% increase for police. And I so move. Okay. Yes. So I made the motion and it was seconded by Councilman Ford. Is there any discussion? Councilman Carlisle.
Chair.
Now, the 50 basis point increase for this fiscal year, do we know what that calculates for the hard dollar amount?
1.5.
So the 50, so 1.5. Okay.
So what would have to be contemplated in the way that I'm presented this, there's an amount that's already built into it. So in essence, we would take that, 1%, 1.5% and increase it by that. Because there's that 2% is already built into the budget, at least for the general employees. That 0.5% is not built into the budget for fire, though. Well, so the net increases that we're talking about would be 0.5% above what's already built into the budget for fire. It would be a 1.5% increase built in for all general employees with exception. So the way that I'm presenting this, I'm hoping that the administration will come back, and how we're presenting these budget items today, I'm expecting the administration to come back and say, Council, here's your wish list. This is how much it's going to cost. And then from there, we can say, well, we can reduce this, reduce that.
Go back and say, this totally screws up the budget. Say, look, this doesn't work.
Correct, right. This is just our wish list.
This is what we want to see come back.
Right,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. I'm sorry.
Respect.
2.7 for half. What you asking, not with the.
Okay, did you want to provide that? Did you want to speak that?
Based on information I have received, to come up with that additional 1.5%, we're going to look at $2.7 million.
Okay.
The 1.5, you've already been given that amount.
So I want to be I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I'm crystal clear.
Councilman Carlisle.
The way this is written is you're just stating in the three recitals, and so you're saying we're going to go from 3 and 3 to 3.5 for general employees and 3.5 for fire. So really 50 basis points for fire.
Yes.
And then a 2% for.
No, 1.5, because
1.5.
2 is built into the budget. We're going from 2 to 3.5 for general employees. We're going from 3 to 3.5 for fire. So everybody, with exception of police, would be at 3.5. Police would be at 5.
All right. I will say one.
Which dispatchers? IBEW. Okay. That's fine. Okay. Yeah. So what this would do though? So IBEW, what this could do, in effect, what was recommended by the impasse committee was 4 for IBEW. This could supplant that 4% with the 3.5.
Yeah, which I think we were going to try and clean up today anyway. Right. One of the things I will say, just on a technical aspect, is this doesn't ask them to come back. This goes ahead and amends it, which it could be re-amended. I get that, but I do want to say that I'm interested. I'm more interested in the exploration and then voting on it. Obviously, the will of the body will prevail, but I may abstain here today until I have more information and then deal with it Tuesday. I just want to let you know generally, but I hear you. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councilman Smiley.
Thank you. So I think just generally thinking through it, I would hate to tell a group of employees that they're expecting to receive 4% from this body, and then we say, hold up, we thought better of it. Instead of getting 4%, you're going to get 3%, because we want to be fair to everyone else. I understand it being fair, but I don't know. I think my father would always say, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. If we tell somebody we're going to give them something, I think we should probably give them what we said we're going to give them, as opposed to saying this would be the second time that they heard once they heard from the administration they were going to receive 4%. They came back to receiving, I think the proposal is about 2% from the administration. And then this body, well, a group of several of us on this body said, you know what? We heard it. We're going to give you 4%. And now it'll be this body's position said, not so fast. I know we told you we're going to give you 4%, and now we're going to give you 3.5%. I think it's too many inconsistent positions as it relates to, specifically speaking to the IBEW folks, that, I have a hard time, taking it from them, and they're counting these dollars, taking it from them 2 times. I have a hard time taking it from them 2 times. So I don't know if I can support this, but I'm all for increasing the pay for city employees, because they do a really good job for us. And we got to start paying people. I tell this all the time. We got to start paying people salary commensurate with their worth. And are we saying that they're only worth 2%? Are we saying they're only worth 3%? So I'm game for increasing pay, but I'm not game for being inconsistent, taking inconsistent positions as it relates to a group of employees that heard twice that they're going to receive 4%, and now to hear something inconsistent. I'm not for that. So I would be inclined to amend this to say leave IBEW alone.
Well, so IBEW would be taken down to 3.5, but Mr. Smiley, I would respond by saying everything is subject to the approval of the budget. So until we have that baked into the budget, we haven't provided that 4% to anybody. We haven't provided the 5% for fire. We haven't provided anything to anybody. So I'd rather, instead of still creating different categories of employees, you would have IBEW at 4, you would have the general employees, everybody except IBEW at 2.
Well,
and now, unless you wanted to amend it and take everything up to 4, that would be your prerogative, but this is at 3.5 for everybody, including fire, including IBEW, including everyone besides dispatchers and police.
Chairman, may I?
Yes.
So we talk about different classes of employees. We've always had different classes of employees as it relates to, it's in my 34-year history, I've never, I don't think I recall Memphis police ever being paid like every other employee. So they're in a class by themselves. So let's just state that. They're in a class by themselves. They put their life on the line. They should be in a class by themselves. Let's state that clearly. Then we have fire, who's usually right there with police. Then we have all the other employees. So will always be a discrepancy when it comes to pay. I think if this council's position that we should pay our employees more, I'm game for that. I'm just really having a hard time of saying let's get rid of the classes, but let's still have this other class that we're not going to talk about, which is public safety. It's still going to be two different classes, public safety, general employees. So unless you're saying, instead of putting fire in the category at public safety, say, Halo Fire, let's move you down and put you in a different category, to general employee category, I'm not game with that either. I just think you'll have a hard time lumping fire and IBEW and all the employees in this catch-all category, unless you're going to tell the police they need to join this category too. And if we look at them now, I don't think they'll be happy for saying, hey, instead of paying you 5%, we're going to pay you 3 or 4% with everyone else. I don't think that's where we are. I don't know. I just got to think through it and hear from some of my other colleagues. I would love to hear someone else chime in as well.
Good discussion. I will say one thing.
Ms. Carla, let me recognize Councilwoman Logan. She is in the queue. Councilwoman Logan.
Chair, my comment was not on this. I can wait until they finish this comment. It was about the previous presentation.
Okay, gotcha. Councilman Carlisle.
Thank you, Chair. Good discussion. Some interesting points. I will say, I think and you did, Councilman Smiley, say a group, and I wasn't really in that. So I will say on Tuesday, it was such a long day. I think I talked about the grandstanding of impasse and how much I bore it. And for me, I think the simplest thing to do on Tuesday was dispose of it. And we made the comment that we're going to come back and deal with it and wrap up. But I respect your position and understand what you were saying. I wouldn't throw myself in that category just because I knew that we had some, much like IBEW represented with MLGW, there were seemingly some he said, she said, and the easiest thing for us to do was follow the impasse ordinance and deal with it and wrap up. But I respect where both of you are coming from. I'm very curious to hear from Chief Smith, because for me, the 2 points that I think I really agree with are, you have to pay people commensurate with the work they do. That's public and private sector, period, right? Like, it's a running, I don't want to call it a joke and hurt his feelings, but poor Manny out there, he's trying to keep engineers on the payroll, and we have to pay them commensurate with the private sector. He loses them. Then we turn around and hire the firms they went to do contract work for us, right? It's like a circular reference from hell. So I agree with that. And of course, I know everybody knows that we have to also be cognizant of what's going on in the labor markets and inflation, and trying to continue to stay competitive and meet that as the cost of living goes up all around the country. And then lastly, and this is the hardest part, balancing that with our constituents, taxpayer dollars, and being efficient and effective with them. So with all of that precursor, I'm very curious to hear a couple things, if you'll get us recentered on where the administration began this process as they were going through budgeting, negotiations with represented and unrepresented employees, and then the totality. And if we don't have that today, by either between now and Tuesday, or on Tuesday, we can talk about the order of magnitude in hard dollars that is a reoccurring expense. Like, we're gonna have to start absorbing this year over year. That would be very helpful for me in trying to make a decision on whether this is in the best interest of my constituents.
Yes. So to kind of recap where we are, as the mayor presented in his budget proposal, we had within the budget, in his proposal, 5% for police, 3% for fire, because that was negotiated as part of their MOU process, which you approved last year, 4% for CWA, which we were able to settle the table as part of the negotiation process, and then 2% for all the other associations, except for IBW, which we came here for impasse. During impasse, you elected to give them 4%, but of course eliminating hazard pay, and they would be on schedule to receive 2% next year. And so now we're here today discussing a possible 1.5% increase for general employees, so that would be excluding police and fire and dispatchers, and that would be just our general employees, which would approximately be $2.7 million for a 1.5% increase for just general employees across all funds.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any questions on that? Okay. Councilman Warren?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know, how does it work with,
Hold on one second, let me.
We've just had our unions negotiate with the administration, and they've come up with what was an agreement. What do we do if what we decide is we let them do those negotiations and then we just go through and decide, no, don't worry about the negotiations, we're just going to do something else? So I think the long-term, yeah, it is our prerogative to do, but I'm not sure that long-term that's the way we want to be running things. We really want to give our, administrative team the ability to negotiate with our employees and come up with something that they think is right, as opposed to always thinking, well, we don't have to negotiate with administration. We're just going to go to council and they'll just give us whatever we ask for. Then we're in the negotiating body. And I'm not sure that that's where we really need to be. We need to be the body that is determining whether this is fair and agreeing and providing oversight. I don't think we should be the negotiating body. So I'm worried that this may be putting us there. And I'd like to know what my fellow councilmen think. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Warren, I always harken back to the roles and responsibilities and the respective roles and responsibilities of the council, the legislative branch, and the administrative branch. It's the legislative branch that determines how much the administrative branch has to spend along those lines. And so, as Mr. Carlisle just indicated, it is always our prerogative to do so, and I don't think that we should take a back seat to the administration when it comes to fiscal matters. I'm always cognizant of the role that we play and the responsibility that we make to the taxpayers of the city. But one thing I want to remind you, you can have all of these hardworking people out here. We give them this 3% now, but when they become a retiree, they have to deal with a 1% raise over 11 years to do so. This budget was contemplated before we started seeing those 8% inflationary numbers for January, 7 and 7 for February and March. And so we know that we're not going to be able to address all of their immediate financial needs with that, but we don't know how long are we going to be in this period. And so this is just a small way of addressing this inflationary matter that we have right now. For an employee, a large number of them will not receive Social Security because we don't pay into Social Security for them. We could do so, but we're talking about a greater hit to the general fund for us to say, and we may not have to face this if we put their COLA increases on Social Security, but we're not there right now, and who knows what that fiscal note would be if we got people on that page.
I guess my concern and what I'm worried about is I'm worried about inflation like you are. I'm just worried that providing this sort of increase without having it being gone through a negotiated process may not be the right way to do it. And if we're thinking we want to give people some relief from inflation, the more fiscally prudent way to do this would be to figure out how much of an inflation bonus we want to give people to help them catch up with, as opposed to give them a long-term pay increase that hadn't been negotiated. So I understand where you're coming from. I'm worried about that too. I'm not sure this is the right way to do it in a committee meeting, and then give an administration a few days to do it. I think I would rather them come back and give me a plan to make sure our employees don't feel like they're being strained by this inflationary time and feel like we care about them, as opposed to raising our budget indefinitely with a raise that, we're going to have to do a tax increase to support in the next year or two. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate your comments and your thoughts, but I think I would prefer to hold on this and think about it more. Thank you.
Thank you, okay. Councilman Warren. Councilman, I'm just making the rounds here. Councilman Carlisle.
Thank you. I think Doc brings up a fair point again. And this may have been something that came to you this morning. You're like, I've been thinking about it and I want to do this. What makes me nervous when you're running a multi-billion-dollar corporation, company, entity like this, small decisions have major impacts down the road, and so you've got to be very thoughtful about what those are. And while and I agree with you, Councilman Jones, the legislative prerogative is the legislative prerogative. And we are responsible for being the arbiters of what do they call them, economic items. But at the end of the day, as was demonstrated several years ago with police and fire, I think it was police in particular, it's our prerogative on how we set the budget. That being said, it makes me incredibly uncomfortable to have, and I know it's budget wrap up, but to have several amendments with tens of millions of dollars of impact on the table and have to make a knee-jerk reaction. That's just no way to run a company. That's how people end up in serious trouble. I would never make a decision of this magnitude this quickly on the fly. And this is why I've been abstaining, because these are big time decisions and they need to be well thought out and they need to be researched and they need to be, it needs to be disseminated to the public. Councilwoman Johnson will appreciate this. The public needs time to understand what's going on and weigh in if they want to. And so I'll wrap my comments up by saying I appreciate the thought. I appreciate where you're coming from, but I personally definitely need more time to think about this. And then I know we've got a couple more that are coming, just to have a moment just to reflect and like absorb it, you know what I'm saying, and process. I'll probably wake up Saturday morning in the shower and be like, oh, okay. So I'll wrap my comments with saying I'm likely to abstain from all of these as we move towards Tuesday and hope that more information can get pulled out. But I know we're also running up against the clock. So,
well, what we're faced with, colleagues, is an administration that starts the budget process in the wintertime. And so it would, in my opinion, it would be inappropriate for us at the beginning of the budget process to say, without hearing from every division, hearing from the chiefs, to basically say this is our wish list after they've had an opportunity to present it. So, but if we don't do it during budget wrap up, when is the appropriate time for the council to do so? I don't think that what hasn't been presented to us, and it could be the will of this body going forward, to say that before budget process, here's what we want. But that's not the way that hasn't been the practice of this council to do so, to say on the onset, here's what we want, you go back and bake it into your budget. Now, if that's the will of the body to do so, but the administration could have very well come with a 3, 4, 5% raise. We had to hear, it's my estimation, we had to hear from the administration what their first stab at this was. And I don't know any other time besides budget wrap up for us to be presenting these type of things. I'd agree without looking at that big picture.
I'd agree with you on employee pay and impasse. That it's very explicit about that process. So I'd agree with you on that. Specifically for the represented employees, I completely agree. On some of this other stuff that we're going to discuss, this is me personally. I found it much easier, much like the council grant program. We passed that resolution when we passed it for 2 reasons. 1, so staff can disseminate that information so people can start to get their applications in. 2, so that the administration can bake those line items into the operating budget as they are starting to move a Ouija board around. So I've found that it's easier, especially since we are part-time, to try and very early on in the process say, these are the things that I'm trying to get done. How do we work together to put them into the budget? But when it comes to employee pay, I wouldn't disagree with you there, especially again for the represented employees.
Thank you. Councilman Ford. Councilman Canale.
I'm good, thanks, sir.
Councilwoman Johnson.
I'm okay.
Okay. Ms. Smiley. Those that are joining us virtually, colleagues. Okay. Seeing no one else interested in speaking on this item, Ms. Owens, would you conduct a vote? I'm sorry.
Vote this down today.
Microphone, please.
If we vote this down today, will we be able to present it again at a later date?
Yes. Well, the only time would be at the next meeting or the meeting.
I'm representing the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah, so this is just a recommendation of the committee, and it would have to, any type of amendment would have to be voted on by the full council.
Okay, we've done that before in the last hour. Okay.
Okay. Ms. Owens, would you conduct a roll call vote on this item, please?
Councilman Carlisle? Councilwoman Johnson? Councilwoman Johnson?
Yes.
Councilman Ford? Councilman Warren?
Abstain.
Councilman Canale? Councilwoman Logan? Oh, Councilman Smiley?
Aye.
Councilwoman Logan? Oh, yes. Councilwoman Logan?
Aye.
Councilman Morgan?
No.
Councilwoman Easter Thomas?
Aye.
Councilwoman Robinson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Swearingen?
Aye.
Chair Jones?
Aye. That item passes. Colleagues, I've also distributed a couple of other resolutions. I won't go through the entire thing. I'll read a couple of the whereases. But the first is a resolution to amend the fiscal year 22 American Rescue Plan Act allocation. And so the part that I'll talk about here will be the fourth paragraph. And it talks about, whereas at the September 16th, 2021 regular meeting of the Memphis City Council, the council approved the administration's proposal for allocations of ARPA funding. Included in the administration's proposal was an allocation for city operational support initiatives, which included allocations in the amount of $39,435,654 for revenue replacement and $4 million for construction cost accelerator. Of the revenue replacement amount, up to $9 million was allocated toward the Hotel Motel Fund, and up to $15 million was allocated towards the Downtown TDZ Fund. And whereas at the May 11th, 2022 budget hearing of the Memphis City Council, the Budget Committee approved the administration CIP budget that requested an allocation in the amount of $10 million to accelerate Memphis cost escalation cover line project. Now therefore be it resolved that the fiscal year 22 ARPA allocations under revenue replacement for the Hotel Motel Fund and Downtown TDZ Fund be amended to allocate those funds for the fiscal year 2023 CIP budget for construction cost accelerator. So colleagues, these are companion resolutions. The first is essentially saying, instead of using, and during our budget presentations, particularly the Hotel Motel Fund was budgeted for this current fiscal year $10 million. When it came before us, those anticipated revenues came in at 50% higher, being $15 million. So what I saw, and this goes back to, we have to hear these budget presentations before we make any type of recommendations. So my recommendation is, instead of using the CIP dollars for that cost accelerator, we can use some of those ARPA funds where we allocated only $4 million. We could use an additional $10 million, or we can use $10 million of this total $24 million and repurpose those CIP dollars in the budget. So now, if you look at the second, and we'll vote on them separately, but just for the purposes of understanding what is intended for those use of reallocated funds, you'll see that looking at the second resolution to amend the fiscal year 23 capital improvement program budget. Whereas, and I'm looking at the fourth whereas here, it is the intent of the council that funds previously allocated from the Hotel Motel Fund and Downtown TDZ Fund for the construction cost accelerator be appropriated to address other needed projects for the city of Memphis. Now be it resolved that the Memphis City Council hereby amends the capital improvement program budget for fiscal year 2023 by appropriating $10 million from the construction cost accelerator line item to the following projects. Repairs to the Mud Island monorail reallocation amount, $5.5 million. Sidewalk repairs, increasing the current amount of $500,000 to $1 million. Park services cover line, increasing that amount from $2.5 million to $3.5 million. An additional splash pad, increasing that amount that was in the CIP budget from $1.2 million to $2.4 million. Traffic calming devices, increasing that amount from $1.7 million to $2.2 million. major modification citywide, increasing that allocation from 9 million to 10 million, and then a new project, which would be the Ida B. Wells Park renovation for 300,000, and that would be the current use. And so what I've provided for you is a graphical illustration of what was previously approved. So the $9 million from the Hotel Motel Fund, the $15 million from the downtown TDZ, to reallocate that to the Accelerate Memphis cost escalation, $10 million. So we still would be addressing the fact that the cost of materials and our construction costs are still going up. We're still addressing that, but instead we're going to be using ARPA funds to do that. With the repurposing of that $10 million, you'll see the 7 programs that are listed here. Councilman Warren. Okay. I move on that item.
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, Councilman Warren.
Yes, what replaces the downtown 15 million or the 6.25 and the 3.75 from the Hotel Motel Fund? Where is that replaced? How's that replaced in those funds?
So from the standpoint, let's just start with the Hotel Motel Fund. It was projected that we were going to receive $10 million. We came in 50% above that, $5 million that, in my mind, we don't need as much of that $9 million of the hotel fund to do so. Of that 6.75, the amount that was budgeted for that was $7 million. And so we'll know we don't have the same, reporting mechanism for that fund as we do for the hotel motel. So we'll have an indication of where that's coming in September.
So have you confirmed that there's extra money in those funds to cover this that we were using ARPA funds for with administration?
Now, they have not come back to council to the only way that they can spend it is to come back to council and say, we are looking to appropriate these funds. That hasn't taken place between September and now, and we're at the end of our fiscal year for all intents and purposes. But when I saw the amount of $10 million that we were projected to have, the amount that's coming in of $15 million, that was before we looked at the ARPA. We made the budgeting for ARPA in those amounts before we knew that it was going to be at 15.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm asking is, if what you're saying is these funds that we put ARPA funds into actually came in above budget to the extent that they don't need those ARPA funds, we can move the ARPA funds to your projects here. So is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and part of that was intimated when we had some of those, when we had some of these discussions upstairs.
And so I guess the question I have is probably for Chief Ford or Chief McGowan. Yes. Can you confirm the hypothesis that Chairman Jones is bringing to us? I would like to hear from administration.
Yeah. Okay. Councilman Morgan, we have you in the queue. Chief Ford or Mr. McGowan, were you able to hear Dr. Warren's question? And can you address that, please?
Yes, I can see the screen. Thank you very much. So we are forecasting for the Hotel Motel Fund approximately $15 million. We are currently at 13.5. That was at the end of April. We budgeted $10 million, but that included, I think, a contribution from fund balance of approximately $3.5 million to balance out the fund for payments that would go to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Memphis Shelby County Sports Authority, and then the transfer out for the debt service fund in the hotel motel. So that fund is currently balanced at zero. And the hotel motel, and I'm sorry, what was the other? The TDZ? Is that where you were looking? The TDZ revenue we know is approximately $16 million less than what it has been in previous years. So there has been, I'm looking to see, I apologize, I'm at home, so I don't have all of my documents here with me. I can look at the TDZ. I would have to look at separately and get back to you on that one to ensure. But in the remember the TDZ is where we use funds for projects that complement our CIP. And I'm not sure if Chief McGowan has any additional information that he could share on the TDZ revenue.
Mr. Chair, if possible on this particular item, could we delay this till our committee meeting and come back and ask administration to let us know exactly how much extra money they got in these funds? Because I think what people in the community may not understand is these are funds that we're collecting taxes on, and depending upon how much tourism and business we have downtown, those funds go up or down. Okay, and so the issue we've got is, did we make enough to where we don't need the ARPA funds to make them whole and to keep them funded the way they're supposed to be funded by the contracts and obligations of those funds? So it would be better before we vote on this to actually know what those real numbers are. If that's okay with you, I move that we hold this for a vote and then bring it back when we have that data. I am definitely excited about the ideas, with the exception of I'm not sure how well we could get the monorail going again since it's 30-year technology. But I'm with you. I want that thing, okay? But I just want to know that we put the right thing on there. I'm not sure 5.5 will do it, but let's bring it back and have them bring us that information if that would be okay with you.
Well, but Councilman Warren, that's the purpose of budget wrap-up, for them to come back to us on Tuesday.
Right, but I don't think we need to vote on this as an approved item until we know we have funds. That's just my comment.
Well, no, so what I'm saying, this is just a committee. So during the full budget hearings, the administration will have an opportunity to present the information to us. The information that may be presented may say to us, we don't have to do it. But the only way for us to put it before the administration is in this budget wrap-up process to do so.
So you're saying if we don't bring this to them, they're not going to get this ready because they know we're going to move it when we have committee. So we have to vote for them to do this before they'll do it for us? Is that what you're trying to say?
No, still what I'm saying is that this is the administration, the third reading for the budget for this next year is Tuesday. So unless we're looking, so I'm trying to get everything presented to us, baked into the cake, for us to vote on Tuesday. So if putting a hold on this, put a hold on this until when?
Till Tuesday. So have them bring that back Tuesday so we'll know what we're really voting on. Because I wouldn't vote yes on this if we didn't actually have that money.
This is just committee, Doc, and so this is where we do this. It is in the full, I would even say it's once we come to Tuesday, when we're talking about finalizing and approving everything, that's when we vote it up or down, and that's when they will have that information.
So I think we're saying the same things. I think it's going to come back to us with information on Tuesday.
Okay.
So I'm not going to vote for this today because I don't know the information, but we'll have the information Tuesday, then we can decide how we're going to vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Carlisle.
Yes, I hear you guys. I think everybody's saying the same thing. Whether you, what I would say is they've got the information. They can bring a proposal and it can be amended Tuesday. We can vote on it, then amend it again. But it's not final until the full council meets. I will remind this body though that we do have another meeting scheduled for the 21st, so we don't have to. As much as the administration would like it to be dealt with on Tuesday, we've got some time. So I'm with Doc. I said this earlier. This is an interesting idea. I will say this is where, and for Councilman Jones and other members that have been here longer, Councilman Ford as well, these are the funky funds. These are the, you have to go deep down into our obligations of in particular the TDZ fund, which supports a significant amount of debt service and cash payments to things like the Bass Pro Shop. And so I'll be interested to hear what the administration's response is on two aspects, which are what the status and health of the funds are, and can they sustain the withdrawal? Can we legally withdraw the money and supplant it? And can we move the ARPA funding around if it's already been appropriated on that first tranche? Maybe this is the second tranche. So there's 4 or 5 mechanical questions that I'd like to have answered. And then assuming just on the hypothetical that it all jives, then obviously we'll get into, there are several things on here that I agree with that you're proposing. We always have strongly disagreed on that freaking monorail. But I do understand, and I'll say this, what I would be supportive of, and I know that for you in particular, it is the monorail, but having been diving into over the last several years, Mud Island, the $4 million that's in the Accelerate Memphis program is not going to be enough to cut it no matter what the future is. So even if it goes to the monorail today, it in my mind, and you may say over my dead body, but in my mind, it's at least into that area. And if they come back and say, like you and Councilwoman Easter Thomas have asked, hey, we don't think we need to do the monorail. Here's our plan. And this is how we want to spend the 4 and the 5.5. I think that's something I probably could get on board with just in my own mind. But for me, I'm like Councilman Warren here. It's a lot of information. It's some interesting thought. I'm very much open to it. I just can't get there until we've got some of those legal, technical, I'm a technical guy. So anyway, with that, I'll yield the floor.
And colleagues, I'll go back to, if not doing budget wrap-up, when? This is the time to do this. Councilman Ford. I'm just going around the dais here.
I'm kind of good, but
microphone, please.
I agree with you on this. Now that monorail, y'all know why it didn't operate. I ain't gonna go no further. You said it, life or death. Okay, I'm through with that one. But that's, go back into your history. That's why it's not there. Okay. Yes. No.
Put like this: the monorail is older than Councilman Smiley.
Hey, there you go. And it's not the idea that it was safe. It was, somebody was pushed off that monorail. Okay, let's go there. That's why. Tell the truth, what it is. Okay, that's why it's not there now. I don't want to give no names. I could do that too. Everything else. Person died. Okay, it was death. Okay? That may be, a lot of y'all may not know, some are too young, but that's what happened. I ain't gonna say no more. But I agree 100% with you.
Councilman Canale. Councilwoman Johnson.
Let me take this opportunity to let you know what I'm thinking. First of all, I do believe we asked a group to look into the monorail and feasibility. We asked them to do a feasibility study. Was that not with Carol Colletta group?
So
we asked for that. So
that's the overall plan for Mud Island. But
no, we sent her in on that monorail because she too had interest in that monorail. But she was saying that they would come back. So I'm just wondering that the first year we need to just go in and get a good overview of what it would actually take to bring it back together and how much the cost would be. I can see us, even if we approve the money this year, it's going to get started this year. It just takes time for projects to be completed of this magnitude. So that's my thought on that. And the other ones, I really don't know if those are priorities. To me, it's the monorail. If we can find some way to get that back into operation. I think most of those other items have been already addressed throughout the budget that's been presented.
Right. So along those lines, Ms. Johnson, most of them sidewalk repairs, we are keep in mind this is the CIP.
I got you.
This is not operating. So this is the borrowed money we are increasing some of the priorities that were already stated in there.
Right. The only thing there is, we were told too, not too long ago, that we had $155,000 that were available for sidewalks. Some of this money is still not being used. So I think the resources are already out there. We just got to make sure that it's being spent. And I mean, we can save for sidewalks, but back to, if you don't have employees to actually do the work, it's not going to get spent anyway. So you can ask for things, but if the actual way or the feasibility of getting it done is not possible, it just concerns me on how much can be done. I was talking with planning and development. There are 5 people short up there. I was going to ask our Director Smith, what's our vacancy at this point? And to try to find the experts that we need, we just don't have them all. And I just hate to obligate the money, can't get the job done, because we just don't have the personnel to get it done. That's just what's going through my mind. Okay. But thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Councilman Smiley. Okay. Councilman Ford and Carlisle.
I just want to ask one question. I know we're talking about the monorail, but what about the river? You know, can the administration bring back
about the what?
About the river. You know, we're supposed to be changing our river. You know, we're supposed to have cruise lines. We're supposed to have a lot of the other.
That's still part of the CIP.
That's why with this monorail coming in, you know, let them come back and make sure that it does not.
Ms. Ford, that everything else as far as the CIP, 95 some odd $95 million is untouched. This is just dealing with the portion that we were saying cost on everything that we're building right now have gone up. This is just reallocating money for, so the river part, everything else that's part of CF, the sidewalk repair, park services, additional splash pad, traffic calming devices. All these things are part of the CIP right now. We are increasing those, so we're not touching any projects that the administration currently had in place. We are increasing, you know, some of those items by $500,000, $1 million here. We're gonna, you know, more traffic calming devices. That's already part of the CIP. It's just taking that $10 million that we could use for inflationary. COVID is causing this inflationary environment that we're in. We're just talking about that pocket of money.
Good, I'm still talking about that monorail.
Well, look, so
I got issue with. Well, I don't have an issue, but like I said, I don't want it to affect anything else that's coming this way. Not that monorail. I have flashbacks on what happened. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm an undertaker, but I still have flashbacks on that monorail. Okay.
Thank you.
And you know what? A lot of things, hey, it didn't happen once. It kind of happened twice. Okay. I got issues, okay, so, you know, when you put some money in that monorail, put some security on it, okay? So I'll be kind of happy, but, hey, you know, people kind of strange now. You know, it's a new world. Okay, all right.
Thank you. I apologize, Councilman Morgan. Councilman Morgan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But before we get to whether we should do this, I still think we have to answer the question of can we do this, and is this a permissible use of ARPA funds? You got to remember the Accelerate Memphis program was started during the middle of the pandemic, which is different than other programs that the Construction Cost Accelerator went to that were initiatives started before the pandemic, and then because of the pandemic, those costs increased. When we got into Accelerate Memphis, we already were in the midst of the pandemic and knew about those cost increase. This might not be a permissible use for ARPA funds, and I think that needs to be answered well before we get into the debate about every line item on here. So I don't see how we could take any vote. And I know this is the time to present it and to talk about it, but that doesn't mean we kind of have to go on the record and take any vote today. So I would be in favor of holding this until Tuesday without question. And then Tuesday I'll get into if we had $5.5 million spare dollars lying around, is the monorail the best use of it or not? But before then, I'd like to hear from the administration about this again, the health of those funds, hotel, motel, downtown TDZ, but is this even an approved use for ARPA funded? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Councilwoman Logan.
All right. Council, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to say that, you know, I'm looking forward to hearing from administration as well, but just to look at what you proposed, I really appreciate the research or the time you spent on it, because it does answer a lot of concerns that we have in the communities. It does answer a lot of concerns that we as council members have had in representing our constituents. It addresses and puts more funding in the areas that we hear the most about, as it relates to what's going on in our city and the people we represent. So anytime that we can increase repairs of sidewalks and adding more to parks for children to do, the splash pads, traffic calming. Traffic calming is one of the main priorities that we all have as it relates to the speeding and all of the things that we've been talking about and trying to find answers to. Even, you know, as recent as this weekend where we had all of the donuts and things like that. So where people actually live, where things are actually happening, you've allocated funds, and I appreciate you doing this and support it. I hope that these funds can be allocated if there was an overage or if there are overages in these areas and we can move them. I definitely think as a body, I hope we would be able to support it, because it may not, be the cure-all, but it is a step in the right direction and moves the needle in areas that are much needed in the community. So I really appreciate it, and it seems as though it's not going to take away from the downtown TDZ fund based on the overage, as well as hotel motel, which we don't, we want to continue with the momentum in those areas. But if there is a possibility to move some of the funding, I think that is a priority in the areas that we see that you have noted here. So I do appreciate it, Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you, Councilwoman Logan. Colleagues, I also have, and did Mr. Canale leave? Okay, because I have some notes here that he had looked, when we had the CIP discussion, he had looked to increase the traffic signal modernization. So I didn't know whether he was ready to present that and if he had a fiscal note that's assigned to it, because I would want us to have that up on the board for the administration to consider and to come back to.
I think, and I see Manny back there, I don't know if he has an additional fiscal note, but I think it was suffice that there were 27 signals that are going to be able to be paid for out of our street maintenance fund from Fund 245, which is public safety referendum. Nod, yes? 27, 26? 30.
Mr. Belen, could you come down to the mic, please?
Good afternoon, Manny Belen, City Engineer. So I think one of the pages on your presentation actually has all the maps that illustrates where all those traffic signals are intended to be installed. And so there's roughly, I believe, 27 using the referendum funds, and there's 4 additional locations as part of the Accelerate Memphis intersections.
Okay, Chief McGowan, so while you're away, Ms. Canale, we're just going through some items. I know that you had an issue with the traffic signal modernization. I don't know whether that issue had been fully addressed in our CIP. It did. Okay.
Chief McGowan addressed that.
Okay. Chief McGowan, you're in the queue, but Mr. Canale has indicated that you all have addressed that. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My hand was raised for an issue. Just coming back to what Councilwoman Logan said, if I can, I've heard several references to the overages in the hotel motel and the TDZ. We will.
Ms. McGowan, we need you to speak a little bit louder, please. You were fading out a little bit.
How's this?
Yes, better.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. This goes back to something Councilwoman Logan said, and several others have referenced it. we look forward to the opportunity to bringing you a plan back that responds to what you're asking for. I do want to just clarify one point. Some folks have said they're referenced an overage in the downtown TDZ and or the hotel motel tax. But let me just be clear on the downtown TDZ. In prior years, we had received about $21 million in revenue that came in, and we had a debt service of $15 million, meaning we had a $6 million surplus every year that we used to pay for projects. Last year, we received $4 million in revenue. This year, we may see a slight increase, still in the single digits of millions, but we won't know till September. But just to be clear, our debt service grows to $18 million this year. So realize when I have a $4 million income and a $15 or an $18 million debt service, that comes out of the city's debt service fund. So there is no forecast for, and there shall not be any excess revenues coming into the TDZ beyond what we expect. Quite frankly, we have $17 million of growth just to get back to where we were. So I don't want anybody to be under the illusion that there is some kind of an excess revenue coming into the TDZ. Further exacerbated by the fact that we now have internet sales tax that is raising the baseline, making it more difficult for us to generate revenue in the downtown TDZ. And we have millions of dollars of commitments that we have made based on those revenues. And that is what the replacement of those TDZ funds are for projects that council has already approved the allocation of TDZ revenues for. So we'll be making that, coming back to you and telling you that, but I just want to be clear, we are far from excess revenues. In fact, we are forecasting deficits for years to come. And the monies that were pledged to this is to make us be able to fulfill the promises of the projects that you all have approved. So with that, I'll stop.
Okay.
We'll come back next week. The issues on the hotel motel.
Okay, Mr. McGowan, I just wanted some clarification on the statement you just made. We're anticipating deficits for years to come in what particular funds?
In the TDZ. When I say deficits, we were on a path to collect $21 million per year.
Okay.
As you know, we collect sales tax increment for the year prior, so we'll have to wait until September to see what happened this past year. It's not forecast to fully recover until the year 2025 or 26.
Okay. Okay, just wanted that clarification. Ms. Carlisle.
Thank you, Chairman. I do want to say on priorities, and I mentioned this, and I was actually starting to talk about it just before we got going, but the sidewalk repair, and this is a slight digression from the main issue, but I think it's critical, and I'm glad you brought it up. I actually had started a conversation with Chief McGowan last week, yesterday, and then today, right before we sat down. I don't know about y'all, but everywhere I'm going, for the tens of people listening, developers build, or the city will build, and really it's usually a developer because they did subdivisions over time. They'll build the curb and gutter and the sidewalk, and then it's in the city right of way, but it's the responsibility of the homeowner. We all know that. The $200,000 that's in the budget, the issue with accessing that is one, it's highly and heavily restricted to 80% of the AMI, plus I think it to be 60 years and older. What we really need to have a conversation about, and I'm talking about it now, but I just really wanted to get it more baked out with the administration before we brought it to everybody, is we need a large 7-figure ongoing fund that is for those that are needs-based but not age-restricted, right? So the issue is the code will go out and cite somebody for a crumbling sidewalk, and their response is, what do you want me to do about it? I make, $35,000 a year, and it's going to cost me $5,000 to repair this. I'm just not going to be able to do it. And so I think it is very important that we take that, and other items in here are really great, but just in particular, I know you mentioned getting the work done, and Mr. Boleyn and Chief, I think, had a conversation yesterday about how would you execute, could you execute it? And so those are things that we're starting to work on, but I'm glad it's in here, because when we were at Berclair last week, it was one of the biggest things they brought up is, hey, sidewalks are crumbling, people can't afford to get them fixed. It's safety, it's neighborhood stabilization, neighborhood beautification, and there is a path forward to doing it, and it needs to be equitable, right? Like, we need to have enough money funding, all 7 districts, Councilman Ford, all 7 single-member district. No supers. All 7 districts, but in a way, and again, in a way there where it's a needs-based lottery system, and it's also for primary homeowners, right? Like, I'm not here to fund that program for somebody that's got a bunch of rental properties. So, but eventually we're going to have to get there. But we need to take care of people who want their street and their neighborhoods fixed. And so, if you'll give us time, but I really do want, whether we've got $500,000 proposed for FY23. We have $500,000 in FY22 that was for traffic calming that's unallocated. We could just carry that forward and put them together for $1 million right there and pilot this thing for a year. But since it was on Councilman Jones's resolution, I just don't want it to get lost. In addition to potholes, sidewalks are increasingly becoming an issue. And to be frankly honest, it doesn't take a genius to look at our median household income and ask yourself whether somebody can replace 15 cubic yards of concrete in a high environment. So, as much as it pains me, we're going to have to do it and help people do it. So I'm excited to see that in there. I know we've been on the subject for a long time, but look, you have to give somebody credit that at least puts a proposal out there, right? I mean, Jones took the time, whether you agree or disagree. I don't have anything in front of me. So my hat's off to Martavius for putting something out and just saying, look, this is what I'm thinking about. I do wish he could come a little earlier, but at least he put something out there. So my tip of the cap there. I will be interested to see the mechanics. There are several things that I do want to see happen. I mean, honestly, other than the friggin' monorail, I'm in agreement with everything that's on here. I mean, the major mods for me, that could go somewhere else into a cover line. But Rhonda said it earlier. I mean, sidewalk, parks, the splash pads are important. They're becoming increasingly popular. We can't cost like $200,000 to go build a pool now. I mean, they're super expensive. Just like a small pool. Like, I'm talking about like a backyard pool, let alone these monsters. So anyway, these are the things that are important to our constituents. So the question is how and where and priorities. So, I'm going to be interested to see how this progresses, but there's a lot of things in here that I really like. So I'll be quiet. With that, I can't vote for it today. Whether we hold it or not, we can dispose of it on Tuesday, but the will of the body can do what it wants to do.
Mr. McGowan, I want to go back to page 11 again. For the first time, actually, of your presentation.
Okay, yes, sir.
Okay.
Page 11.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that we're talking about our debt service taking on. We're going to be looking at continued deficits in that TDZ. From that TDZ standpoint, any type of shortfalls, is that not covered by the debt service that we're looking at here?
Yes, sir. And when I say that, I mean, we hope to be able to recover to meet the debt service annually, but the surpluses, which were what we had pledged against projects in the future, are where we're at. So yes, if there is a deficit in the debt service, it would come from our debt service fund.
Okay.
But we're hopeful that will recover to the point that we at least meet debt service. But the projects that we have pledged TDZ revenues forward into the future through 2030 are the area where we're trying to replenish that revenue to fulfill the promise of projects that you and the mayor proposed and y'all had approved.
Okay. So, and this is just a statement for my colleagues. If we look at how much money we were servicing the debt out of the tax rate, it was $1.04 in 2017. If we look at 2022, we're just at 85 cents. And so what we're collecting less money to pay that debt service based upon what our current tax rate is. Now, I also would, in looking at the capital pay-go, and this is just a financial planning type of a question that we have here. We know that we're going into a higher interest rate environment. If we're going to have higher borrowing costs, this capital pay-go is almost like I'll say it again, this is our savings account. So why aren't we increasing the amount going into our savings account when we know that the cost of borrowing, so your interest rate on your credit card is going up, but you're not putting more money into your savings account to do so to address those costs? So to me, those things are sort of counterintuitive just for the sake of lowering the tax rate, which is in essence what's been presented to us. So from a holistic standpoint, whether we're talking about retiree raises, whether we're talking about sidewalks, all of that, colleagues, comes from that general fund number. And that general fund number is 40 cents less than it was in 2017. So are we really being the stewards that we are touting ourselves to be when we're not adequately? So how we pay those raises is that general fund. But how do we address increased cost of borrowing in this debt service and capital pay go? But we're not doing what is in our best financial interest by ignoring this and just pushing this down the road and not addressing some of the real concerns and financial issues that we have. That's my 2 cents. There was a motion made on this. Did you want to, in effect, I don't see, if we hold it, they're going to come back Tuesday, so what's the will of the body?
Let's hold it and let it bring it back.
Okay. No objection to the hold? If there's no objection to the hold, we're just asking that the administration provides an update on this particular budget amendment. On Tuesday, this upcoming Tuesday. So we've talked about it.
We have your request.
I'm sorry?
Yes, sir. We've received that information, and we will come back to you with an analysis of everything that you proposed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McGowan.
Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking also if we could get an update on Accelerate Memphis, where they are and what their projections are.
Projections as far as what?
To complete those particular projects that they put in the Accelerate Memphis project. All the projects, I mean, we just need to know financially how close they are going to be before they complete the projects and what are they projecting their overages will be.
Yes, ma'am, we can do that for you, and that's why we requested the $10 million of construction cost acceleration to make sure we completed them. But we'll happy to give you a report.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I don't know if we've adequately addressed another item was a motion. Mr. McGowan, does this include Mr. McGowan, there was a motion to amend the General Services Fleet Fund by $1 million. Is that included in what was presented earlier?
It was not included in what was presented earlier. I believe that's an oversight, so let me check back on that. If there is a motion, if there's a change there, we'll bring it back to you on Tuesday.
Okay, so during one of our previous committee meetings, there was a motion made in the budget committee that we increase that item by $1 million. So I would be hopeful that when you come back, like I said, as I see this, this is our almost our wish list, and then the administration coming back and saying, okay, well, this is how much everything costs. I would want those costs to be included in there as well.
Yep, and I think Chief Ford has more detail on that too.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I was going to tell you, Councilman Jones, excuse me, thank you for the question. The amount that we were presented in this presentation, if you notice, it was general fund only. We did not address that. We know that, and we do have for our records, that there was $1 million amendment to the fleet fund proposed budget, increasing the fuel inventory by $1 million. And we have that for you, sir. It's just not part of the general fund.
Okay, thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Colleagues, the last item I'd like to present, and I'll have something in writing. I'm sorry, thank you. Well, no, it was a whole with no objection. Last item that I'm going to present, I have something in writing, but during our parks presentation, I asked about a program, and Mr. Walker talked about a program that had taken place in previous summers, where on Friday nights, some of our community centers are open from the hours of maybe 6 to 10, 6 to 11, right, something along those lines. So I saw a news report this morning talking about the city doing something in conjunction with some churches. So it's a little different model than what was presented in previous years. So I'm going to make a motion in our Tuesday meeting that we increase that item by $250,000, because part of that is going to be this summer, but if we look at next year, June is going to fall in this next fiscal year as well. So whether the administration chooses to use, whether they can ramp things, they may not be able to ramp things up for July of this fiscal year, but they should be able to ramp things up so we can have more participation. And I'd like to see it more robust, because this is, from the news stories, it appeared that we're not necessarily using our facilities anymore, we're using the churches, and it's a great partnership, but I don't see why it can't be a complementary type of a situation as opposed to, and I don't see Mr. Walker here, he may correct me on this, but I don't see any, I see this as almost that these facilities are replacing what we're currently doing. So I'll have that resolution to increase that budget item for $250,000. Okay. Chief Ford, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. I was just going to tell you that that is in addition to the Friday night programs. We took your recommendation, and we went back to Director Walker and Mr. Ken Moody, asking about how quickly could we expand those programs to other locations. That is not a replacement. That is an addition to, yes, sir, already taken care of for you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I just saw the news story this morning, and I hadn't had any updates prior to, hadn't had any updates after our committee meeting. So thank you for that information.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Chief McGowan, did you want to address that, or did she cover it for you? Oh.
No, sir, she covered it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So a question that I have for you then, with that being an additional offering, how many, and it can be an estimate if you can get back, if you have to get back with me Tuesday, that'd be fine too. Do we have an idea, if this is supplementing what we're doing, how many total children are we serving? Potentially.
Thank you, Councilman Jones. If Ken Moody is still present.
He's not. Okay.
He is not. He's already left. I'm sorry. Because he helped us coordinate that through some churches. So we will get that information back to you about the expanded program and how many children we anticipate that expansion to cover. Sir, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. The next thing, there was a proposed budget amendment here in the notes that I had. There was a motion to approve the operating budget for the city court clerk's office without a salary increase. So that was on here, and I didn't know whether there was going to be a motion for anybody else, from anybody to act on that. But I was of the opinion, just of the personal opinion, I'm okay with letting the court case take care of itself, and then we act after that's been taken care of. Okay. Budget wrap up. I don't see anything else. Is there any other business? Colleagues, Councilman Robinson, Logan, Easter Thomas, Morgan, is there anything that you wanted to add before we adjourn? Wait a second.
A 45-minute speech prepared. I'm just kidding. To staff, There's tons of information that has been asked of the administration over the next several days, and I, like my colleagues, would like to finish this on Tuesday evening. So I know you guys sent out a draft of our committee schedule for Tuesday. May need to get with the administration, Chair Jones, and revisit the amount of time allocated Tuesday morning for budget, because there's just going to be a lot of information and we're probably going to need some extra time just as a.
Councilwoman Johnson, Councilman Cornelli, and Councilman Jones' resolution for raises will be on the committee in the full agenda since they received a vote tonight.
Yeah.
And then the ARPA and CIP will be kept in committee.
Okay.
But it can be sent down. But what I'm saying to you is we have a robust. I think the draft I saw we start at 9:30, which would be a record for us. But I just want to make sure we don't. I don't want to end up here till 9:30 again, jazz bands aside. But yes, and that there's enough time to cover all this. I'd rather be early. I'd rather adjourn his budget committee on Tuesday early than run out of time and then end up here and have a late night Tuesday. That's all. And I know we've got some time flexibility, so that's all I'm saying is please get with the chair and the administration and make sure that we're ready to go. All right. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, colleagues, it was just brought to my attention, and thank you, Councilman Canale, that, Mr. Folks, are you here to present the 800 initiative this evening?
It's a great program.
Okay. Have we already rescheduled that, Ms. Owen? Okay, what time? Ms. Folks, we had already rescheduled it at the beginning of the meeting. We'd already rescheduled it for Monday at 3:30. Would you be able to make it then? Okay, thank you. Colleagues, is there?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there any other business? Okay. Seeing no other business, motion has been